Welcome to yet another beautiful episode. I hope you had a fantastic time last week. We talked about how the Middle East crisis is currently affecting our agricultural system here in Nigeria. And in case you missed that episode, it is still on YouTube at official Rapid TV. But yet again, this is the Green Line and my name is Martha Alu. Now, on the Green Line, we explore forces shaping our food systems and agricultural future. And let's dive into today's conversation because we have such a long conversation today. Between January and March of 2026, the global agricultural sector has been shaped by a complex mix of record-breaking production, tightening profit margins for farmers, newly formulated policies, and shifting trade dynamics that are quietly redrawing the global food map. And for today, we will be looking at certain major headlines that made waves from the month of January to the month of March 2026, typically Q1 of 2026. And we'll be doing a few breakdown, across market commodity trend, climate change, and a whole lot of others. So you definitely want to stick with us on this episode. We'll go out on a very quick break and we'll get back to the conversation.
From the soil beneath our feet to the tables across the world, agriculture is the heartbeat of Nigeria's future. Yet challenges persist. Limited finance, outdated methods, policy gaps, and untapped opportunities. The Green Line is here to change that. A groundbreaking weekly television feature that connects policy with practice, farmers with markets, and innovation with impact. We dig deep into the full agricultural value chain, from land preparation to mechanization, financing, food preservation, exports, and beyond. With expert insights, success stories, and bold conversations, the Green Line isn't just a show, it's a national development platform. Educating, informing, entertaining, inspiring the next generation of agropreneurs. The Green Line connects Nigeria's agriculture to its true potential. Join me every Friday at 11 a.m. only on Rapid TV, Star Times channel 176, and online at www.rbnradiotv.com.
The first headline for today is about Brazil's soybean dominance. Brazil has once again reinforced its position as the world's leading soybean exporter, with over 70% of its harvest completed by March, and projections pointing to record output even in the face of climate disruptions like flooding in the south. Now, the implication of this is this further shifts global agricultural power towards South America, giving Brazil stronger control over global feed supply, especially for livestock, pricing influence in international market, trade relationships, particularly with China. And if we are to study a few trajectories, you'd see that over the last 2 decades, Brazil has invested heavily in large-scale mechanized farming, expanded into the Cerrado region, benefited from trade tensions between the US and China. And this has gradually allowed it to overtake the US as the dominant soybean exporter. Now, we will not just be looking at these headlines, we will also be studying the implications of this to our country, Nigeria. Nigeria relies on imported inputs and feed components. Global soybean dominance affects livestock feed price. And the opportunity here is Nigeria can scale local soybean production to reduce import dependence. And if you ask me, that is something we should key into. Now, next headline, we'll be talking about the low grain prices and the high import cost. Global grain prices, especially corn and wheat, have dropped due to high supply levels. But input costs like fertilizers remain elevated, creating a squeeze on farmer margins. And the implication of that yet again is farmers will now earn less revenue but spend more to produce. I remember on one episode of The Green Line, we went into the market and we had conversations with farmers, particularly those that cultivate tomatoes. And one of the farmers said, now it is not only expensive to buy these fertilizers, it is not even available. And looking at the size of your land will determine how many packs, or how it's being measured, the fertilizer will come, and how many you would use on your farmland. And at the last time we spoke, it was about 300,000 naira he mentioned. Now think about the implication of that to the farmer. He puts a lot into cultivating the crops, and when he comes out into the market, he cannot put the prices as much. You see, so more inputs for the farmer, less output or less profit. So this discourages production in the next planting cycle, and it could lead to future supply shocks and prices spikes. You see, during the post-COVID and war-driven prices spikes in 2022 and 2023, it led to increased global production. Now, supply is high, prices fall, but input costs remain sticky due to energy and supply chain issues. Now, the implication of this to Nigerian farmers already is just that Nigerian farmers already operate on a thin margin, and this trend worsens farmer profitability, food affordability. It reinforces the need for subsidies or input support system. Now, the next headline is the beef market strength. The beef market strength. Now, you would agree that we saw beef from at about 3,000 naira. We saw beef from 2,500 naira to 3,000 naira. It became 5,000, 6,000, and as we speak, it's between 8,000 to 8,500 naira. And you might be wondering why this is, but let me tell you, beef prices are rising globally. North America is experiencing record cattle prices due to reduced herd sizes, while Brazil continues expanding exports, strengthening its global position. The implication of this is that meat becomes more expensive globally, and countries with strong livestock systems would gain export advantage. Protein affordability becomes a growing concern. Now, climate changes like drought in the US, reduced herd sizes, rising feed costs forced farmers to cut production, and Brazil capitalized with lower production costs and export capacity. Now, Nigeria's livestock sector is already underdeveloped as it is relative to demand, and the rising global beef prices, higher local meat prices. This is what the margin is. And for every disadvantage, we would look at an opportunity. What we can do is invest in ranching systems, improve feed and breeding programs as well. Now, the other angle of the headlines we would like to spotlight today is geopolitics, policy and sustainability in the first quarter of 2026. We'll go out on a very quick break, and when we get back, we'll get into geopolitics, policy and sustainability. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. We're getting now into geopolitics, policy and sustainability headlines for quarter one of 2026. And the first of it is the EUDR compliance knuckles down. That has quite an implication. Now, here is it. The European Union is tightening enforcement of the EU deforestation regulation, which is the EUDR, which requires that commodities like soy, cocoa and palm oil entering the EU must be fully traceable and proven not to be linked to deforestation. That might be very concerning or might be very funny as we see trees being cut down every day here in Nigeria, regardless of whether they are economic or non-economic trees. Now, this is a major shift from volume to verification, and countries and exporters that cannot prove traceability risk being locked out of EU markets. Now, supply chains are being forced to become more transparent, digital, and accountable. For years, global pressure has mounted around climate change and deforestation. Like I said, the EU has moved from guidelines to enforcement, because if you continue to place out these policies out there without actually enforcing them, it becomes a shadow boxing kind of thing. So this act of moving from guidelines to enforcement will now make sustainability a trade condition, not an option. Now, the next would be about policy. It will be International Year of the Woman Farmer, 2026 International Year of the Woman Farmer. Now, the United Nations has designated 2026 as the International Year of the Woman Farmer. And in fact, I'd say that we're quite aligned on the green line because 2 weeks ago, we had a woman farmer represented here in the studio, and she was able to recount to us some of the struggles that they face as female farmers. And now the United Nations has designated 2026 as the International Year of the Woman Farmer, recognizing the critical role women play in global food production. And the implication of this is basically a push for gender-inclusive policies, increased funding for women farmers, better access to land, finance, and technology, signals a shift from recognition to action. Now, you know that these are some of the major issues that was raised by the female farmer we had in the studio last week. Now, women have always formed a significant portion of the agricultural workforce. And according to statistics, about 60 to 70% of women are represented on the farmland. So if this number of people are represented, but historically limited land ownership, restricted access to credit, global policy is now trying to close that gap. And like I said, women in Nigeria account for 60 to 70% of agricultural labor, yet they own less than 15% of land. Now, gender-focused financing, land reforms conversations, stronger cooperatives like SWAFON, which was represented here last week, is the way to enforcing this as well. And then still on geopolitics and, policies, the Middle East risk to fertilizer. The Middle East risk to fertilizer. And this is what we discussed last week. There are escalating tensions across the Middle East, and this has been on for over 40 days. And it has begun to disrupt key global shipping routes, pushing fertilizer prices, particularly urea, up by nearly 46% between February and March 2026. You might be wondering how this affects us. Fertilizer is one of the most critical inputs in agriculture. A spike like this directly translates to higher cost of production, reduced fertilizer usage by farmers, lower yields in upcoming planting seasons. Now, this sets the stage for future food price increase. Not immediately, but the truth is it has even begun here in Nigeria and in other parts of the world. But in the next production cycle, this will hit even deep and closer home as well. Fertilizer markets have been unstable since the COVID era disruptions, the Russian-Ukraine war, which also affected major exporters. Now, Middle East instability adds to a third layer of the pressure, especially because the region is central to energy and shipping logistics. Now, even with local production capacity, Nigeria is still tied to global fertilizer pricing. Farmers may cut back on usage, experience lower yields, and the direct impact of that is higher food prices and reduced supply. This is exactly what we are dealing with, especially when it comes to food availability here in Nigeria. This is one of the major headlines in the first quarter. And as a matter of fact, it is gradually entering into the second quarter with us because as we speak, the crisis between United States, Iran and Israel is currently ongoing. Now we'll go next to the very segment where we'll be talking about climate and environmental impact for quarter one of 2026. We're doing a lot of assessment today, and it's mostly talk, and informing you about the things that you need to know and the areas of opportunities that you need to key into. We'll go back on a break, and when we get back, we'll get right into it.
From the soil beneath our feet to the tables across the world, agriculture is the heartbeat of Nigeria's future. Yet challenges persist. Limited finance, outdated methods, policy gaps, and untapped opportunities. The Green Line is here to change that. A groundbreaking weekly television feature that connects policy with practice, farmers with markets, and innovation with impact. We dig deep into the full agricultural value chain, from land preparation to mechanization, financing, food preservation, exports, and beyond. With expert insights, success stories, and bold conversations, the Green Line isn't just a show, it's a national development platform, educating, informing, entertaining, inspiring the next generation of agropreneurs. The Green Line connects Nigeria's agriculture to its true potential. Join me every Friday at 11 a.m. only on Rapid TV, Star Times Channel 176, and online at www.rbnradiotv.com.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. It's still the Green Line right here on Rapid TV. And in case you have forgotten, my name is Martha Alu, and we have been talking about some of the major headlines, in the agricultural ecosystem, the agricultural space, as you would like to call it, for the first quarter of 2026. Now, it is important that we have this conversation just so we are able to track our progress and look at the limitations that we had in the first quarter and how we can correct that going forward to the second quarter of 2026, just so that we can experience some level of increase in the second quarter. And now we move on to climate and environmental impacts, the first of which will be weather volatility across key regions. Now, early 2026 has been marked by extreme weather contrast, severe dryness across southern Africa, and alternating floods in parts of Brazil. Now, you would say Brazil is experiencing increase when it comes to soybean. Brazil is also still experiencing flood and some natural disasters that is deterring them from producing as they would. Now, think about countries like Brazil, who is already on the map for the first quarter of 2026 for the progress that they have made, especially when it comes to export of soybeans. Think of what such a country will do when all conditions are favorable enough for them to actively perform their agricultural responsibilities. Think about it. Now, disrupting planting cycles and harvest expectations are some of the things that have happened in Brazil as well. And the implication of this is agriculture becomes less predictable and more risky because farmers will face crop failure in drought zones, yield loss, and infrastructure damage in flood zones as well. And this will create global supply instability even in high-producing countries. Now, climate patterns have become increasingly erratic over the last decade. And in fact, even in Nigeria, here in the FCT, we have been experiencing some level of unusual climate change because the weather is unnecessarily hot. I'll say unnecessarily because it didn't used to be like this, right? And that's why it's important that we pay attention to the environment. Now, traditional farming calendars are becoming unreliable because usually at the time of our forefathers, they know that at this season we'll plant corn and we will get yield. We'll plant granite and we will have enough yield. We'll plant this. But now these calendars have become unreliable because we no longer have the rainy season come at the exact time where we have had on the calendar. Don't ask me where we got the calendars from. We just have a psychological picture or a psychological time frame of where everything should happen. And that's why it's important to be precise in the year 2026. Yes, I know we now have more reliable systems. We have agri-tech. We have more technologies coming into the agricultural space, which will help us give us a more reliable information. Now we are moving from season-based farming into risk-based farming. Now, for Nigeria and Africa, you'd see that Nigeria already experiences flooding in the middle belt, drought in the northern regions. And in fact, we have had cases of insecurity in the north, which is also another disaster that we don't pay so much attention to, especially when it comes to its effect on agriculture. Now, the result of this is reduced yields, increased food price volatility, and there is urgency. The urgency is we need to shift towards climate smart agriculture, which is where we now have, systems like the hydroponic system, which we discussed last week, which is where that also comes in. Let's go out on a quick break yet again. And when we get back, we'll get into the next segment. Yes, welcome back and thanks for staying with us, talking about more climate and environmental conversations, especially when it comes to agriculture. The foot and mouth disease, FMD crisis in South Africa This is a severe outbreak of foot and mouth disease in South Africa, and it is causing a widespread livestock loss, with farmers pushing for faster vaccine access and greater private sector involvement. The implication of this is basically that livestock losses reduce meat supply, export capacity, and it leads to higher meat prices, trade restrictions, because any country that knows that there's a disease imminent in your livestock system would definitely not want to have that flown over to their country or exported to their country, as it will have grave consequences on them as well. Now, trade restrictions also, like I said, it highlights how animal health is directly linked to food security. Now, the FMD outbreaks have occurred periodically across Africa. It's not the first time. Weak veterinary systems and slow vaccine access have made containment quite difficult. Increasing livestock demand is raising the stakes of such outbreaks. Nigeria and Africa, or Nigeria particularly, first of all, has a large livestock population, but weak veterinary infrastructure. And the risk of that is cross-border disease spread. And what we need to do urgently is strengthen animal health systems, improve vaccine access, and response time as well. Also, water management takes center stage in the sustainable system of agriculture. Water is now a central agricultural issue. The African Union has declared 2026 the year of sustainable water, while regions like California are tightening water use regulations to manage the scarcity. And the implication of this is water is no longer just a resource. It is now a strategic agricultural input. Basic knowledge: you need sunlight, you need water, and you need air for your crops to grow properly. Countries investing in irrigations and water systems will now stabilize production, reduce climate risk. Others reduce chronic food insecurity. And you would see that global agriculture has long depended on rainfall. But with climate change, rainfall is now inconsistent, which has caused a shift. And this shift is happening towards irrigation, water efficiency technologies. And in Nigeria, over 80% of Nigerian farming is rain-fed, and this creates extreme vulnerability. The opportunity that lies here within is irrigation infrastructure, river basin development, and water storage system. These are very important systems because, you know, we are so used to traditional systems of doing things sometimes that we do not embrace newer ways of cultivating of crops and foods and what have you. You remember hydroponic farming? I keep making reference to that because it is a now more sustainable way to practice agriculture. So as a farmer who has been in the trade for a long time, I know what your forefathers said about the farmland. I know, you know, all of the practices, the cultural practices that has been passed on to you, especially when it has to do with agriculture and cultivation. These are quite understandable, but it is important in today's world, and it has become quite imperative that you are open-minded when it comes to adopting newer technologies or adopting newer methods of farming. It is important. It has become evident that we can no longer rely on rainfall. Places like Lagos had all year round rainfall. And I say that because as at January, it still rained in Lagos. As at February, it still rained in Lagos. They are currently experiencing rainfall in Lagos as we speak. Other states experienced a delay with like 2-3 months. And we know usually rain typically starts March to May. Around that period, we experience rainfall at about this time. However, some experienced it earlier than others. This is to tell you that there is a shift, and you must be willing to adopt that shift, or you must be willing to adjust to that shift, just so you can have smarter and better ways of practicing agriculture. Well, I really hope I've been able to give you all of the major headlines that are making waves in the agricultural sector. There's a lot more, especially when it comes to technology. Technology is taking over, especially when it comes to agriculture. In fact, we have had episodes here where we talked about smarter ways of practicing agriculture. We now have drones spreading fertilizers across farmlands. We have tractors that also come with pumps that can spread water on the farmlands. These are better and easier ways to doing things. You need to follow the moving train. And to close out the show today, you would see that what today's headlines show us is that agriculture is no longer just about production. It's about power, it's about resilience and global influence. From Brazil's dominance in key commodities to shifting trade alliances, rising input costs and fertilizer shocks driven by geopolitical tensions like that of the Middle East. The global food system is being reshaped in real time. And at the same time, climate volatility, water scarcity and animal health crisis are making farming more uncertain and more complex than ever before. So even as policies begin to respond with stronger sustainability rules and growing focus on inclusion and gap between global shifts and local realities remain significant. And for countries like Nigeria, the real question is not just how we respond, but how quickly we can build a system that is resilient enough to withstand these shocks. Because in today's world, the future of food will belong to those who are prepared for it, not those who fold their arms and waiting for what to happen to happen. In agriculture, whatever will be will not be. Sometimes you have to make the change that you want to see. Thank you so much for being here with us on the Green Line this beautiful day. We will head out now, and trust me, we will be back next week for more updates on the agricultural scenes. There are lots of investment opportunities that are now being open, especially when it comes to agriculture. You just might want to look at that. Remember, we are active across social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at RapidTV. On YouTube, most importantly, you can share this with your friends who are looking to get into agriculture, just so they know how geopolitics, policies, sustainability is shaping the world of agriculture. It is at official Rapid TV at www.rbnradiotv.com allows you to connect with us from anywhere in the world. Once again, thank you so much for joining us on the show. My name is Martha Alu, and I will see you next week.